Hi everyone, this is Zunker Chapter 13, Job Loss and Transitions. Growing need for programs and strategies to assist adults in career transition. Some choose to have a career change, which basically means that they're choosing to get another job, and then some are forced to change, and that means maybe they were laid off or they were fired. Some of this is positive and some of this will be negative. Amma and Drucker said in the 2000s they are in the middle of a transformation, which is not necessarily complete just yet, in occupational structures and career patterns. People who succeed are intelligent enough to learn new skills and willing to experience new and different work situations. What that is basically saying is that let's say that you had very specific skills. Let's say just Photoshop. Photoshop is basically a program where you are working on how to change a picture in a different way, like for advertising. And let's say that you were laid off or you were fired or whatever it is, are you willing to go back to school and learn a little bit more about, let's say, the field of graphic design so that you have a bigger or wider set of abilities? Okay. If you are, that means that you are aware that you're going to probably have to adapt to the environment that's changing in front of us when it comes to jobs. But if you don't, you're like, no, I'm only sticking with Photoshop, then let's say that another program gets developed and you don't know it and more people are going to use that over Photoshop, then obviously that means that you're going to not be able to be hired, right? So that's something that you'll hear or see when there is a recession, is that people will go back to school to get a master's or to get another degree because, or just, take a couple of classes to learn Excel or whatever, is to make their skill sets wider so that they can actually be employable in more types of jobs. Flexibility to adjust and adapt to different work environments, and the capacity to relate to other people. Today, adapt quickly to new and different ideas, goals, procedures, tools, and requirements. And that's actually really important now because we are in a world of technology. So we are expecting people who don't know a lot about technology to start learning about it, because if they don't and they choose not to learn anything about the computer, they're most likely going to be really behind compared to everyone else. Adults in Transition, Moves and Sue says that there are two phases of transition. Phase one is elevated stress levels that usually accompany transitions, almost like a crisis situation with fear and panic following after the feeling of loss or loss of control. Phase two is in a more relaxed state of mind, focus on situational influences, circumstances, and clients' unique interpretation of the past events and current circumstances. So let's say that you decide you're going to quit a job, right? It might feel really great to quit your job because maybe you didn't like it, but then, there's a fear that comes into it, which is, oh my goodness, am I going to have another job? Am I going to be employable? I don't know. And so that is that state of panic or fear that people might feel. But if you transition in a way where you understand what's going on and you're ready to transition, like, you know what? That was my old type of life and I want to change it to a different one. So I'm going to go into this field and I'm going to succeed at it. If you go with that mindset, it's going to be a lot more calmer, and you can basically reflect on what has happened in your past and use it to benefit you in the future. And my advice for you is that if you are not getting fired or if you know that you're going to be laid off, is to definitely start looking for a job immediately. Never leave a job without having a backup job or your new job coming up. And the reason why is because sometimes it actually takes up to 3 months or even longer for a person to find work. So if you quit and you didn't look for another job, you might actually be 3, 4, 5, 6 months out of a job with no money. So that's something that you might want to think about when it comes to transitioning from one to another. Schlossberg says that there's an anticipated graduation from high school and college, finding one's first job, and marriage. So those are the things that you're anticipating. Unanticipated would be being fired or transferred to another location. Chronic hassles are working with a hostile boss, poor working conditions, or long hours. Chronic basically means long term. So these are things that happen at your workplace that are long term that you don't like, hassles, right? That is a hostile boss or a mean boss or a difficult boss. The place that you work in is actually not very safe for you, or you're working really long hours and that's not something that you wanted. Events that do not happen, not getting a promotion, the corner office or request a change in scheduled work or work schedule. So those are things that might happen to you as well, which is that you don't actually get those promotions that you were hoping that you were going to get. So how does that make you feel? There's also voluntary job change, which is an expression of job satisfaction and desire to find a different challenge. So let's say that you're working as a secretary, right, or an administrative executive, and then you decide that you want to do something a little bit more, like maybe managerial. After a certain while, you're like, you know what, I have all the qualities and skill sets to already be an executive assistant. Now I want to actually be a little bit higher. What am I going to do to get that promotion? Then there's also recession or other environmental reasons, such as globalization, which is when we start to lose jobs. We need to then decide whether or not we want to go find another type of job. So there are some job loss concerns. People who lose jobs due to recession or globalization are likely to experience some psychological effects, such as stress with a new job search. They reevaluate their skills and goals, possibly leading to a totally different path. And then self-worth can be damaged without a paycheck and career identity. So what I was saying is that if you do decide to transition to another job because of, let's say, being fired, there comes a whole stressful part like, was I not a very good employee? Is that why they fired me? Or, what is wrong with me that I wasn't, allowed to stay at that place? Why was I one of the people who were laid off? And those things can really make us mentally, psychologically very off balance because of that. So we want to definitely make sure that the client that you have, you want to talk those things out and realize, maybe the real possibility is that the company just did not have enough money to pay everyone, so they had to let some go, and maybe the newer employees were let go, and you are one of them, right? So definitely we don't really know what the real reason is, and so we don't want our clients to just anticipate and think about all the bad stuff, and not necessarily think about more realistic stuff like finances and stuff like that. And then also, if you're unemployed, you're not making any money, you're going to feel worthless, right? Let's say that you were helping with paying the rent with your family and now you can no longer, so you feel like a failure in that department as well. So again, there are many psychological effects that can happen to someone who has been laid off or fired or whatever it may be. Middle-aged men are more negative to unemployment than younger or older men. Older men may be considering retirement, so it's not as stressful, and changing jobs, becoming more of a consultant. Okay, so you're talking about younger men, maybe you're like, no, it's okay, I'll find another job. And an older man's like, well, I'm getting closer to the time where I need to retire anyway, so maybe I'll just, be kind of like a freelancer. A middle-aged men, which is supposed to be men during their peak of their careers, if they get laid off or fired, it can be a severe blow to them. Women report greater health decline after losing a job than men. Loss of support of one's psychological well-being. Jehoda says that number one, daily time structure that is devoted for working can affect you because let's say that you're used to going to a job at 9 o'clock and coming home at 6. If you no longer do that, you kind of feel like, oh, what am I doing with my life? Two, shared experiences and interactions with cohorts and other people outside the family. You might have coworkers that you hang out with afterwards, and that sense of friendship is now gone. So then again, that can also affect your psychological well-being. Third is the opportunity to express purpose and goals in life. So you're not able to actually do the things that you had dreamt that you were going to be doing. Fourth is reinforcement of personal status and identity. So because you were, let's say, a scientist or a nurse or whatever, you felt really proud of it. So you felt like, you were an important member of community, and not to be able to do that can affect you as well. 5 is participation in activities associated with work that is viewed as a necessity in the give and take of daily life. Okay, so again, that's part of that community sense of community as well. The big picture is that you might have lost some support in your life, and the results are that you could become clinically depressed, difficulty with personal relationships. You might start having fights with your partner or your family members or your children. And then, of course, you might have mood swings because of all of this. There's also an inability to provide for family. Loss of housing, food, and other essentials can be devastating for families, and that causes family problems. Family members feel isolated, insecure, and experience a poor sense of well-being. I just want to show you right here, if you're looking at the PowerPoint, is Alexandra Rosas. She is a person who is on this series, this podcast, and her story is actually really interesting. So what I'm asking you to do now is just to stop this and then go and listen to her story. It's about, I think, 10, 12 minutes, and I guarantee that you will enjoy this podcast piece. So please pause and then come back afterwards and we can go forward. Mental health problems. Unemployed workers experience mental health problems, poor life satisfaction, marital family problems, and physical health problems. It's dependent on stress reaction to a job loss, re-employment expectations, and then coping resources such as personal, social, financial matters, lengthy time of unemployment. So remember all the things that we've been talking about in the last couple of slides. You can see how that all really does affect a person. It's not just like losing a job, it's all these other feelings that that is associated with what it means to have a job and to have status in the community. How it feels to be able to say, I paid rent, right? Or I paid for my car, or I'm paying my credit card bills or my student loan bills. But if you cannot do that, you start to freak out just a little bit or a lot potentially for some of your clients. Outplacement counseling. Marks in 2003 said that feelings that one has lost control of life, stress, anxiety, lack of trust, fear of taking risks, and feeling of insecurity, ambiguity, and role conflict, which basically means you really don't know what's going on anymore. Who are you? What is your purpose in life now? Low morale, which means kind of like low self-esteem, and loss of confidence, and of course feeling guilt and shame. So you can sort of see how when a person loses a job, there's actually a lot more feelings that are associated with their entire life. It's not just like, oh, I lost a job. No, it's all these other feelings that come along with it. Denial, anger, fear, and acceptance. Denial stage is basically unable to fully accept the job loss, hoping that it was a mistake and will get the job back. Anger stage is realizing that one has really lost the job and have anger directed at people, events, and companies, so you might blame people. And then support groups is extremely helpful during this time. Fear stage is worry about paying the bills and food for family, realizing that a new job is essential. There is a spirit of hope with a counselor that will help, basically provide empathy with finding new work. And of course, the acceptance stage is accepted that there was a job loss and that they are not alone. Now the client is effectively prepared to look for work. So you can see how people can go, wait a minute, what happened? Was I really fired? Was that a mistake? Am I going to get that job back? And that's the denial stage. And then anger stage is getting really upset about someone because you're like blaming that person for the reason why you might have had that loss. So having someone support you at this time is really important. The fear stage then sets in, which is, am I going to be able to pay my bills, right? Am I going to be able to take care of my family and myself? And that requires a lot of people to empathize with that client because, you don't want to feel like you're alone about this, right? And of course, acceptance stage is, basically going, okay, I did lose my job, but that's not the end of the world. Other people have lost their job before, and I'm going to be able to find a job because other people have also been able to find other jobs as well. And when they are in this mindset, then you know that they're ready to go look for another job. Financial counseling, addressing the stress reactions with clients' inability to pay the bills for home, food, maybe tuition, and of course medical costs if they get sick or they have a disability. There might have been a severance pay, which basically means like, look, we're going to have to let you go from this job, but we're going to give you 2 months worth of income so that, you're not suffering because we gave you the surprise layoff or whatever it is. Or they might extend your medical insurance for additional 6 months, depending on who it is that is your insurance company. And of course, you can also file for unemployment as well, or unemployment insurance. Counselors will focus on transferable skills and retraining programs. Clients then will learn how to assess the changing job market, which is basically understanding the structure of how employment works and what kind of jobs are popular now, what jobs are no longer popular. Find job openings, build a resume, learn how to do well in the job interview, and of course make decisions. Some causes of unemployment, globalization has been a major factor. because we outsource to lower level jobs, which basically means, let's say, factory work, like you've heard of like making clothing. It goes to India, Vietnam, Mexico, Pakistan, and stuff like that because they are willing to pay less than what Americans are going to get paid. Bottom-up model is simple assembly tasks are the first to be outsourced, and then jobs in manufacturing of goods. Skilled work such as computer program is next, and then highly skilled job performed by research-oriented engineers and scientists. So you can see right here, the lowest level type of skills, which ones don't require education, are usually the first ones to go out into the world as a globalized economy. Okay, so that's why we encourage you guys to go to school, get a degree, because you will be doing actually higher level thinking, hopefully, and also your job is going to be a little bit more secure than the ones without education. Information technology jobs outsource and contribute to the 2009 recession. About 1.1 million jobs were outsourced, and that is technology, which is kind of like the newest thing now, right? If you've ever had to call for a help of something and you realize that person might not be in America, most likely that person isn't in America. I've also heard people who are trained in different countries to speak like Americans, so it sounds as like you're talking to someone who's in America, but it's actually another person in another country with kind of like an Americanized accent. And that is because technology, the bottom line type of technology, questions that people have usually don't necessarily need to be employed by Americans who require, let's say, a higher pay. If they're in a different country like India or the Philippines, their pay is a lot lower. And they can answer those questions that you might have about, let's say, hey, I can't figure out how to turn on my computer or whatever. Those things they can outsource to other people in other countries. Reasons for job loss. There is one, job exportation, is relocation to other countries because there are skilled workers in other countries that are willing to work for a lot less than Americans. Outsourcing is a third-party organization, so that means accounting, web development, telemarketing, and then customer services. So that's the other thing that starts to get sourced out as contracted so that you don't necessarily need to, let's say, pay for insurance and stuff like that because it's kind of like hired just for a specific job. Automation, use of machineries and equipment to replace human labor, especially in the automobile industry, will have a major effect on job loss for humans. So we've heard about that, right? Is that machines are basically building other machines, or if you've heard about it lately, like Carl's Jr. and I think their other one is called Arby's, maybe. I think it's the same company. Basically, what they're trying to do is they're going to try to have machines make your burgers and fries, and maybe just have one or two managers who they're overseeing everything. But machines will be making everything for you because you can, program it to pick up a patty and then put it in a bun and then warm it up and then serve it to a customer. Increased global competition is marketability. Fewer things are being sold that are made in America. So because of that, we have less jobs, so we're gonna not have jobs because of that, because other countries can also do the exact same thing for a cheaper price, and so now people might go, we're just gonna make it ourselves and then we're gonna sell it, which means that companies here might close because of that, because they can't compete with the cheaper prices that are, let's say, in China or in other countries. Underemployment. Again, that's not unemployment, this is underemployment. People accept part-time jobs when they are unable to find full-time work. Part-time jobs are low skill and low pay than the person with a high skill set. So a lot of people who don't have a high education usually do a lot of part-time work, part-time jobs. And the reason why part-time jobs are so popular is because the company, the organization, doesn't necessarily have to always pay a higher fee or pay for your health insurance or any of that other stuff that usually comes with a full-time job. And you want to be careful, although some of you guys are very happy with part-time job, that you are actually being underemployed, which means that you're being paid less than you really truly deserve. Underemployment rates of adults 24 years or older or younger who have a bachelor's degree are higher, was 9.4 in 2011. That's really, really high. But at that time, 2011 is like right after recession. So a lot of people are just trying to find jobs, any type of job, even if it's part-time, such as driving for Uber or Lyft or something like that, because they wanted to make money. But these are people who actually have a higher skill set, and yet they still need to do this type of work as opposed to more educated work. So it's up to you to find out whether or not you can survive off of that, or whether or not you want to go and pursue something more serious. And this is why in the rehabilitation services program, we asked you guys to do an internship for a year before you graduate so that you have something to put on your resume if you don't already in that field that you are hoping to work in, which is in disabilities or at-risk populations and stuff like that. And for criminal justice or psychology majors who are taking this class, we encourage you to also probably do a internship, even if it's not required from your department, because you can risk some time right now on not working and still survive because maybe financial aid and stuff like that, right? But if you're going to graduate and your resume doesn't show that you have anything in the skill set of the field that you're studying, people are not usually going to hire you. When you look at job descriptions for want ads, usually will say, 1 year experience, 2 years experience, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years experience. And so if you don't have any experience, you can't really become a very viable candidate during that time period, right? So at least have 1 year. We encourage you guys to find internships where you actually get paid. And that way you don't necessarily have to just work for free, which is what a lot of students think internship is. But it's really about learning and having that experience that you can put onto your resume. That suggests that there is a need for more focus about jobs while still in school. And hopefully, because you're taking this class, you're going to start to understand how work works and how and what you need to make you a candidate that's much more desirable at a workplace. And then you can help your clients as well. Underemployment also affects the community when property values go down, less safe when there is less money being placed into the community. So let's say that if you don't buy a house, you're not paying property taxes, which is going to help your community with all the things that they need for safety and stuff like that. So if people are working just part-time jobs, majority of people who work part-time jobs are not necessarily going to be able to participate in that and help with that. So then that also brings down the safety of the neighborhood as well, or the schools. If you've ever heard of parents who are like about to have children or just had children, they're like, we need to move to a neighborhood with a good school, right? That school money comes from the people in that area, which is why usually if you live in the neighborhood, you're expected to go to that school. But you also know that some schools are just not very good in that neighborhood. And part of that is because there's a lot of people who might be living in poverty. And so the community doesn't actually have as much money to put into their schools to then educate their children. Underemployment also affects the community. Oh, I already said that. What has happened to all the good jobs? Clients need to understand that there are highly efficient workers with impressive backgrounds in the sciences, mathematics, and computer programming in China, India, and the Philippines. So that's something that you need to realize is that computer programming is actually something that a lot of people understand, and a lot of people are trained to become really good programmers in different countries. And so they're going to try and take those jobs from Americans. Um, People who love math, usually you can hear about that when it comes to more Asian countries, is that mathematics is something that they can still use. They might not speak English, but they can definitely do math, right? It's a universal language. And of course, the sciences. Does not mean that all highly skilled jobs are being exported to other countries. It's just now more competitive. So before, let's say that you had different companies in America who can offer you the service. Now people in China, people in India, and the Philippines now can also go, hey, we actually do the exact same thing and we'll actually charge you a lot less. So then companies are going to outsource to those people. Social networking is also effective in finding work as well. And social networks basically means building an online, hopefully, on online, because that's pretty typical now where, let's say on Facebook, there's certain websites that will, that you follow, let's say, will say, hey, we have a job opening, or we know that there's a job opening, please apply if you're interested, right? The RCA, Rehabilitation Counseling Association at Cal State LA, basically is a rehab club, and they post a lot of jobs that are related to disability and at-risk populations. So if you follow them, you're more likely to be able to see some of these want ads. Social networking, websites such as Facebook, LinkedIn, which is something that we're expecting you guys to do as part of your assignment, and then Twitter are very popular. Relationships with others are built over time through online discussions groups, chat rooms, and then other use of photographs. And that's something that is very true. I always ask my students who are going to graduate is to consider having a brand. I know that sounds really awful and cliche, and maybe even terrible for some of you guys. But let's say that you have an Instagram account, a professional one, not your party one, but one where you show that you work with people with disabilities. You participate in, let's say, activities that support your community. You show that you're studying, all these things. So you document yourself, like let's say one picture a week. After a year, you have I think like 50 something photos, and those are all timestamped so that people can say, oh my gosh, this person's been doing this for the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and it's like, wow, this person is actually meaning what they say they mean on their resume, right? And that's something that would be really a really good support for your brand or for yourself. Granovetter basically said that strength of weak ties or casual relations. 56% of all professional jobs at the time were obtained through personal contacts. Most of them were not close friends, but more of a casual acquaintance. So this is what networking basically means. You don't have to be BFFs with everyone that you meet when you go to a conference or a job fair, but someone you might meet and know and talk for a little bit. You might bump into them again at the next job fair or another conference, right? But as they get to know you, like, hey, wait a minute, don't you know a lot about XYZ jobs? Actually, there's a job opening in our area, and I don't know if you're interested in applying, but you should. So what they're saying is that 56% of those professional jobs were got through this way, not from a close friend or anything like that. Towards the lifelong learning commitment, again, we have to realize that technology changes all the time. Stay abreast of the information explosion, which is basically if there's a new program, is to be aware, try it out just to see if you like it. Like one thing I know is that a lot of people in 2020 is talking about TikTok. I personally have no purpose in using TikTok, but I need to go on there just to see what it's all about because it's such a huge explosion, right? Same thing with Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest or whatever it is whenever there's something like that that comes up, I personally feel obligated to play around with it, learn about it, see what it's all about, so that I don't feel like I don't know what that's all about and look like I'm behind everyone. You want to upgrade your skills, reduce the chances of being obsolete, right? Again, like I said before, if you were a DVD maker, right, once DVDs are no longer popular, which pretty much it is right now, it's no longer popular, then you're out of a job and you can't find a job if you're going to just try to become a DVD player because no one really wants you to make any more DVDs. Changing individual needs. Again, society, as we grow more sophisticated, will realize that we want more stuff that's online as opposed to opening up a storefront. If you open up an online store, it might be actually something that more people would want to buy from because they can't get to your, let's say, physical shop. Reformulating goals. So again, redecide exactly what your goals are now that you know that society is changing, and create a demand for effective planning. So that's something where you want to be able to think about your future in an effective way, in a smart way, because you're aware of all the things that are going on. Seen as a continuous, but with intermittent pauses. So again, technology will change all the time, but there are some times where you know that this one will stay for a while, just like Twitter, Instagram, and stuff like that. It's hanging around for a good amount of time so far, right? So most likely we're not going to necessarily need to change those, but other things might pop up, and then you would have to learn about that. Faulty cognitions inhibit systematic logical thinking and can be self-defeating. Faulty basically means not good, not right, right? Cognition, thinking. Number one is self-deprecating statements, such as, I'm not a good student, no one really likes me. If you tell that to yourself all the time, your attitude, the way that you present yourself is going to be very negative, and then people actually are not going to like you. So you want to not do that. Absolute or perfectionist terms such as must, ought, should, unless, or until. I should have been the one promoted. Unless I get an A, I can't go home, right? So these are like black or white answers, it's either yes or no. Like either I'm the best or I'm a loser, right? You might know students who must have A's all the time. If they have a B, they freak out, right? And this is kind of absolute or perfectionist thinking. When you know that a B is still very, very good, right? But for some students, their expectations are so high that they have this black and white thinking. And so if that happens, then suddenly if they don't get it, they're like a major failure when they really are not. Three, overgeneralization or of negative experiences. So let's say that a student might say, since I failed the first exam, I'll fail the entire course. Or all the children at school hate me, right? Just because maybe one or two of them don't like you doesn't mean that they all don't like you, right? So that's something that you need to start thinking about as well. Maybe my studying wasn't so great, and now that I got a D on my last test, I'm going to try to study a little bit harder and then bring my grade up. Maybe I'll get an A, and then my average might be a B or something like that. Okay. Negative exaggerations. All professional athletes are greedy, or you insulted my mother, you hate my family. So you don't want to exaggerate, which basically means like go over the top over these ideas or anything like that, right? You might see some people are greedy and, and stuff like that, or someone might have insulted your family, but it doesn't mean that they hate you, your entire family or anything like that. Maybe, you know, it was just kind of someone just saying something to be hurtful. Factually inaccurate statements. So you need an A average to get into college, or children with autism are lazy. Obviously, these are very not true, things, right? For the rehab program, I believe it's a 2.75 that you need to get. That's definitely not a 4.0, which is what an all A average would be. So obviously these things are, for some reason, someone heard it somewhere or thought that they heard it somewhere, and then suddenly they made it true, as opposed to actually looking to see if it's really accurate or not. And then they might not even bother to apply because they're like, well, I'm not really smart, so I'm not even going to try. Trust me, there are a lot of people who actually do have like a 2 point something average, and they're going to still be able to go to school if they are committed to it and graduate, which is wonderful. And that's something that we want to make sure that everyone who needs to know that knows that. But sometimes we get these faulty cognitions, and then we want to correct our clients or ourselves about that. Common work-related faulty cognitions. One, there's only one vocation in the world that is right for me, which basically means that you think that there's only one job in the world that you can do. And that's not true. And I'll give you an example. For me, as an instructor here, this is my second career. I used to work in fashion and art, and then, I did that for about 10 years, and then I decided to, shift over and, do other things instead. And so teaching has become my second career. Two, until I find my perfect vocational choice, I will not be satisfied. Three, someone else can discover the vocation suitable for me, which basically means you're going to ask someone else to tell you what you should do. And that's not something that should happen. We want you to actually find out what you like to do, what your interests are, and then explore it, and then let's see if you can do it. Four, intelligence tests would tell me how much I am worth. It is not exactly how you're supposed to do that, right? Intelligence test is just to test out to see what your score is, but it doesn't mean that if you score lower that you're a failure or anything like that. But it helps show you, what your scores is for this specific assessment. It doesn't mean that you have no skill sets. You can be very, very talented in art or whatever, mathematics, counseling, criminal justice or whatever it is, but not necessarily might measure that in the intelligence test. Five, I must be an expert or very successful in the field of my work. That's not true. Six, I can do anything if I try hard. I can't do anything unless that doesn't fit my talents. And that's not true. You won't really know what you can or cannot do until you try it. And that's something that sometimes people are afraid of doing, is failing. But guess what? Once you fail, you're like, now I know, I don't like that, or I can't do that. And then you move on to other things. But if you say no to everything because you think that it's only one thing that you can do, you really are going to do yourself a disservice. Seven, my vocation should satisfy the important people in my life. And that sometimes happens with a lot of collectivist families where their parents are saying, you have to be a doctor, or you have to be a police officer, or that's it, or whatever. And that's actually not necessarily true. I know that you might want to make your family happy, but if you're not happy, how are you truly making your family happy? right? It might be superficial, and you can also be holding all of that inside you, and that's not necessarily healthy for you. 8, entering a vocation will solve all my problems. That's not true. You will still have problems, and you will learn how to resolve them through intelligent thinking and maybe even help through therapy or counseling or other people. 9, I must sense intuitively that the vocation is right for me. So what that is basically saying is I just have to feel it inside me that this is the right job. And that might not necessarily be true either. You don't necessarily need to be able to find a job that you might be happy with, okay? Like I'll give you an example. Maybe there are people who really love music, but they don't necessarily want to be a musician. They maybe want to do engineering or computer science or rehab or something like that, or being an officer or a nurse. So just because you are passionate about something doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go into that. And of course, 10, choosing a vocation is a one-time act. It isn't. The faster technology rises, the more likely that you're going to actually start changing jobs more and more often because technology is eliminating certain types of jobs and then creating new jobs. And so it used to be back in the olden days where we didn't have all this and people did move on a slower pace when it comes to the evolution of technology and jobs and stuff like that. People could have been, let's say, a milkman or a newspaper delivery person for their entire lives. But now, if you think about it, newspapers, how many people still get newspapers? They don't. They go online. So that means that you're most likely going to end up doing something else, right? So it might be delivering driving a big rig or something like that. And that's what this is basically saying. Homework assignments, recording. Record your thoughts before going to work, during work, and after work, just to think about how it makes you feel during these times. Construct positive thoughts for those that are considered negative and discuss the differences with the counselor. So you might say something like, ugh, I hate using Word, right? Which is like the program that you're typing in. But then now situate it so that it becomes a positive, which is, oh, I know a skill set that is valuable in many jobs, right? So you can kind of uh, basically kind of change your attitude, reverse your attitude to a more positive idea or thought, because that will make you feel worth more, right? And more accomplished as well. At least this is a counseling technique that we believe in. Make a list of goals. Number 1, decreasing doubts about career opportunities. 2, increase positive thinking through self-talk. So you got to tell yourself these things like, I'm actually helping the community by doing this job, or I'm actually helping this population by working in this job because this population needs, help, and I'm one of those people who is contributing to it. 3, how to be successful in a job that is highly demanding. Okay, so again, think about it and see what are ways for me to go beyond what I'm doing now so that maybe I can get a promotion later on or move into a higher paid job with better responsibilities that might affect a lot more. Here's an example where I can say something like this. When I got my master's, I was actually thinking about just becoming a counselor at the Department of Rehab. And I might have had a case of maybe 300 people, and that's it. And I would probably follow those people for years, right? But when I realized about going to teach instead, once I got my degree and I got my CRC, my certificate, basically what I realized is that I actually know a lot of skill sets and I can impart it to hundreds of students every semester. And those students, like let's say those hundreds of students might end up having a caseload of 100, 200, 300 people each, right? So suddenly what I'm doing now is actually helping a huger amount of people, a larger amount of people than if I just became a caseworker. And this is one reason why I became an instructor is because people recognized that potential in me and told me, hey, you can do this and then actually affect a lot of people. And I believe that and I actually do feel really good about my job because of that. And this is why I feel passionate about teaching. For each goal, clients are to indicate levels of confidence that they can use to be quantitative measures of success. So basically, here you can indicate on a scale, let's say 1 to 10, how you're feeling about your job today. And as you go through and think about it, you can start to change it, hopefully, when you have a better attitude, if you already don't have a better attitude about it. So that way, you'll know that you're actually increasing your self-esteem, self-confidence, and that you love your job. But if you don't, then maybe it's time for you to consider changing to a different job. Goal 1 here is decrease doubts about career opportunities from 40 to 80. So again, when you want to change, you don't want to go from 1 to 10 because it's not really likely. You might go from 1 to 3 first, baby steps. And then from 3, you might go to 3 to 5 or 4, right? And then, hopefully work on it until eventually you get into the range where you're happy, which might be 8, 9, or 10. Goal 2 is confidence, to increase positive thinking through self-talk, 40 to 70, and then confidence in being successful in a job that is very demanding, from 50 to 80. On a scale 0 to 100, intervals of 10, and you can mark yourself maybe every month or every week or something like that, see how things have changed when it comes to that. And hopefully you'll have a high score for all of it, or your clients would have a high score for all of that. Self-enhancing of self-talk. I'm not very good at explaining procedures. I know I'll mess up today in that meeting. You want to change that too. I'm able to express myself effectively if I put my mind to it. I believe I can make a contribution by offering my explanations of solutions. So right here, you can think about, sometimes when I assign, let's say, a presentation for the class, the student goes, oh no, I'm going to stutter, I'm going to forget, I'm going to do all these things. Instead, if you go, if I practice enough, all this information will come out naturally to me and I won't sound so nervous or whatever. Or if I practice in front of my friends 10 times, 40 times, in front of my pet dog or cat 20 times, 30 times, the more you do it, the more confident you're going to feel about your presentation, right? So then you can say, the better I am able to express myself effectively, because you put your mind to it by practicing, then you're actually going to probably be okay. But a lot of students don't practice in front of anyone. They don't even try it out one time before they do their presentations. I'll give you an example. There's a class where I asked students to present for 10 minutes. I've had students go on for 30 minutes. And it's like, did you not time yourself to know how long you talk? And students are like, no, I didn't. I thought that I could do it in that time. Guess what? You didn't. And for some instructors, they might stop you at 10 minutes and go, you're done. And then maybe you've only gone through a third of your slides or your presentation. So that's not very good. Or I've had students where, it's 10 minutes and they talk so fast that it's actually done in 4 minutes. So you're like, that was really quick, and they didn't pay attention to the audience to get a feel of, anyone asking questions or confused about anything that you presented because you're so nervous, you're not making eye contact with the clients or the audience, and those are things that you need to have as a skill set for presenting in front of people. So that's something that we talk about, is to be able to practice over and over so that you can say, oh, I am actually accomplished because I put my mind to it and I practice.